A small village in Kuban. 15,000 residents. Everyone knows everyone else. 33 streetlights on the central street. The rest is pitch darkness. And in this darkness, something happened that shook the entire country. If the residents hadn't started raising the alarm, the crime could have remained unsolved. Complete darkness in the alley. The killers dragged the victim into the thickets to finish what they had started. Traces of blood on the ground. The grass had dried and blackened from the congealed blood. And then an anonymous call came in. A male voice warned, "While the relatives are burying the deceased, someone is trying to hush up the case." This tragedy shattered the lives of an entire family and shocked everyone who learned the details. 5 children were left without a mother, and a single question got stuck in each of their minds forever. What really happened to Mom? The case of Natalia Dmitrieva is more than just a crime report. It is a story of horror, of suppression, and of a system that only woke up when society wouldn't let it sleep any longer. An attempt to understand the chain of events that led to the monstrous tragedy in Kuban. The answer to the main questions. How could something like this happen at all? And why was the local investigation in no hurry to take on the case? For what reason were more than 30 law enforcement officers dismissed from service after this murder? The woman's body, disfigured beyond recognition, shocked even seasoned operatives who had seen a lot in their lifetime. Those who first arrived at the scene couldn't talk about it for weeks afterward. Averted gaze, a cigarette in trembling hands, long silence. But the investigation did not begin immediately. Only after the brutal reprisal against Natalia caused widespread public outcry. Saibay, a small village in Krasnodar Krai, which was once planned to be turned into an urban-type settlement. An ordinary village, not a backwater. Around 15,000 residents. It's certainly far from the city. Here, everyone knows each other by face. The center is defined by the streetlights, a 200-meter stretch of road where bulbs are lit. A total of 33 lights on the main road, another 14 are scattered across other areas. In the daytime, it's an ordinary village. Children run around the yards, grandmothers on benches. Cars occasionally pass by, raising dust. But with the onset of dusk, everything changes. The sun sets, and most of Saibay plunges into darkness. Not into a semi-darkness where your eyes adjust and you start to distinguish silhouettes. Into a real, thick darkness, where you can't see anything a meter away from you. The other streets, with the arrival of night, plunge into absolute darkness, literally. Locals have long been accustomed to it. After 9 in the evening, only those who know the way precisely walk on such streets. Who remember every pothole, every turn. So, it was in that alley where Natalia's mutilated body was discovered. At midnight on May 13, 2018, 40-year-old multi-child mother Natalia Dmitrieva was returning home after meeting with her friend Vera at the local cafe Ivushka. An ordinary evening. The women sat and talked. Natalia was in a good mood. It was rare for her to get out of the house to distract herself from everyday life. Surveillance cameras recorded. 2 teenagers were following her, first at a short distance, then closer. The woman never made it home. The distance from the cafe to her house is less than a kilometer, 5 minutes at a leisurely pace. Natalia walked alone, in the dark. A familiar road, walked hundreds of times. Her shoes tapped on the asphalt. She didn't look back. Why? Saibai is a quiet place where everyone knows everyone else. What exactly happened between the victim and the teenagers in the dark alley, no one knew at first. But for her, everything ended in a real nightmare. What the criminals did to the body resembled a plot from a horror movie. According to initial data, Natalia was hit from behind on the head with a stone. The blow was unexpected. The woman fell. Then, worse, rape, torn mouth and ears, a crushed skull. They hit her with stones again and again. Then the sadists pulled the woman's internal organs out. They did it consciously, methodically. The death was agonizing and terrifying. The cries of the unfortunate woman were heard by neighbors for 20 minutes. 20 minutes! That's a long time if you imagine it. In that time, help could have been called. Someone could have run out, shouted back, anything. But no one dared to go out. One of the neighbors recalls, a male voice was heard, repeating, "life" or... The second word could not be made out. The neighbor froze at the window, listened. Darkness beyond the glass. Voices somewhere out there. And the woman clearly screamed, "Don't! Don't!" The man repeated his phrase several times. Then gasps were heard, as if he was strangling the victim. The neighbor stood for a little longer, then went back into his house. His hands trembled as he dialed the police number. The police, of course, were called. They arrived 20 minutes later, by which time the woman was already dead. 20 minutes. That's enough time to get from one end of Simbai to the other. But they didn't make it in time. The mother of many children didn't make it to her home by some 100 meters. Literally, one turn, one street. Other neighbors recounted. They woke up to groans, went out onto the porch. May, a warm night. Someone even initially thought it was cats. But no. They heard a male voice ask, "Life or sexual act?" A strange question, horrifying. Then the pitiful pleas of the woman, "Don't, please, don't." The voice was weak, intermittent. The woman was gasping for air. After that, wheezing sounds were heard, as if she was being strangled. The neighbors ran back into their houses. Someone immediately dialed the police. Someone else first woke up their family. Panic, fear. And all this time, the criminals continued to beat Natalia. One of the neighbors woke her husband. He went out onto the porch, asked what the noise was. It was dark. There was almost no moon. In the darkness, he could only distinguish the silhouettes of a man and a woman, two shadows on the ground. One was moving, the other was not. In response to the shout, the guy replied that his wife had fallen. The voice was calm, mundane, as if his wife had truly just stumbled. The neighbor stood, listening. At that moment, the woman was already silent. Only the guy's breathing was heard, heavy, quickened. The neighbor turned around and went back into the house. Then he didn't sleep all night, replaying those seconds in his head. Some residents confessed. They simply didn't understand what was happening. They didn't imagine that a murder was taking place. Otherwise, they would have come out, even with pitchforks. Others frankly said they were scared that the same thing would happen to them. Fear paralyzed them. In the darkness, you don't see how many of them are there. 1, 2, 5, armed, sober? All this flashes through one's mind in seconds, and fear triumphs. As it turned out later, the killers continued to torment the victim, dragging her body deeper into the bushes. The ground was loose, clear tracks remained. They dragged her by her arms, one, then the other. They only stopped when a police UAZ van with the district police officer arrived at the scene. Headlights sharply illuminated the crime scene, and in this light, two figures became visible for a second. They froze like animals in a spotlight. Then they darted in different directions. The brutes disappeared into the darkness while the district police officer was getting out of the car. The district police officer immediately found shoes on the road. One lay sole up, the other on its side. Nearby, a phone, its screen shattered. A large, dark blood stain on the asphalt. The district police officer shined his flashlight. The blood trail continued towards the bushes. He asked for backup and sought help from the local Cossacks. There hasn't been a full-fledged police station in Sabai for a long time. For the entire 15,000-strong settlement, 2 people work in the duty unit and 1 district police officer. 3 people for everything. When something serious happens, the Cossacks help. Essentially, it's a voluntary people's vigilante group, but without them, it's impossible to manage at all. Natalia's disfigured body was found right there, in the thickets, literally 3 meters from the road. The Cossacks, together with the police, began to comb the streets in search of the criminals. They split into groups, went in different directions. Flashlights shone into the darkness. Voices called out to each other. Those who managed to see the body said, "It was impossible to look at it." One of the Cossacks later confessed, he had served for 20 years, seen many things, but never anything like this. He turned away, lit a cigarette. His hands trembled. He stood with his back to the spot for a long time, unable to bring himself to turn around again. By that time, at Natalia's home, 3 little ones still didn't know that Mom would never return. They slept in their cribs. Their breathing was even, calm. Children's dreams. Only Natalia's adult children and husband, Alexei, roamed the apartment like shadows. It's impossible to convey the state they were in. Alexei sat in the kitchen, staring at a single point. The elder son stood by the window, motionless. Just staring into the darkness. That evening, the husband didn't object to Natalia going to the cafe with her friend. The woman was constantly busy with the children, homework, food, cleaning, laundry, food again, homework again, a never-ending cycle. And at least occasionally, the husband would take on household chores so that the mother of 5 children could rest. "Go," he said. "It's understandable. Always at home with the children, these household chores." He let her go. Natalia was delighted. She quickly got ready, put on makeup. She smiled at her husband in farewell. That was the last smile of hers he ever saw. At 10 in the evening, the man called. He asked how they were, and if the women wanted to continue the evening at their place. They could have tea, talk some more. They refused. It was already late. Everyone had to get up early tomorrow. Alexei didn't insist. He said goodbye, hung up. He fed and washed the children, after which they all went to bed together, not waiting for their mother's return. When the call from the police came, Alexei didn't understand at first. He asked again. Then he silently lowered the phone. He sat on the edge of the bed. The elder son saw his father's face and understood everything without words. After the call from the police, the man composed himself, took care of the children, but there was emptiness and unspeakable grief in his eyes. He moved mechanically. He poured breakfast for the children. His hands did everything on their own. His mind was somewhere far away. This is the suffering of a person who endured not just the death of a beloved wife, but the loss of a loved one who was first turned inside out and then buried. 2-year-old Irochka, a copy of her mom, didn't leave her father's side for a single step. She clung to his leg when he stood up. She asked, "Where's Mommy?" Alexei picked her up, hugged her close. He remained silent. What do you answer a 2-year-old child? The older ones, 16-year-old Dima and 19-year-old Evgeny, tried to hold themselves together. Their faces were stony, their backs straight. They needed to help their father with their younger siblings. But at night, Evgeny lay with open eyes, staring at the ceiling. He didn't sleep, he just lay there. Dima sat in the kitchen, smoking out of the open window. He smoked for the first time in his life that night. Both were the pride of the family, excellent students. One was interning in Germany, studying to be an agronomist. The other was an athlete, an Olympic prize winner. Both had a future, plans. Now, these plans seemed to have lost their meaning. The couple had lived together for over 20 years. Alexei remembers every detail of the day they met at the sewing factory, as the local factory is called. Natalia worked as a seamstress. He worked in the warehouse. He saw her during his lunch break. She was sitting by the window, eating an apple. The sun was falling on her hair. He sat down beside her, started talking. She smiled. That was it. Just a year later, the first son was born into the family. Small, red, screaming. Alexei held him for the first time and understood that everything had changed now. Then 3 more boys, one after another. The house turned into a noisy beehive. And 2 years before the tragedy, Natalia gave birth to a long-awaited daughter. Alexei cried with happiness when he learned it was a girl. After 4 boys, a girl. The woman always took care of herself. After 5 births, she maintained her figure. She exercised at home when the children were asleep. Even at home, her hair was always styled, her friends recall. She could walk around in an apron all day, but her hairstyle was always in order. She was a jack of all trades. Baskets, paintings, and curtains made by her hands were placed everywhere in the apartment. Cross-stitch on the walls, knitted napkins on the tables. Her hands were constantly doing something. She couldn't just sit still. Fateful evening. On that fateful evening, Natalia met her friend Vera at a shop in the center of the village. It was about 8 o'clock. It was still light. People were out walking. The women hugged, then went for a walk. They talked about their children, their husbands, their plans. A typical conversation between friends who hadn't seen each other in a long time. The acquaintances headed through the ill-fated Ivushka and sat down at a table. Inside it was stuffy, music was playing. Outside the cafe there were 2 more tables. It was cooler and more pleasant there. Vera recalls, at the second table sat a half-drunk man with a bicycle. He sat alone, drinking beer, staring into space. Also at the establishment were 3 teenagers, 16-year-old local lads Maxim and Andrei, and another, 20-year-old, Savili from Krasnodar. They stood in a group, smoking, chatting. Sometimes they laughed, loudly, sharply. A couple of hours later, these guys approached the women. It was already dark, and the crowd in the cafe had thinned out. Natalia had known two of them since childhood. One of her sons studied with them. The boys also knew who they were sitting with. There were no problems. The women and teenagers did not argue, kept their distance, and addressed each other formally, V. The guys were drinking vodka. A bottle stood on the table, in plain sight. The women, beer, light a little. Vera also knew one of the suspects, 16-year-old Andrei. The boy was friends with her daughter. A good guy, seemingly, polite. He studied normally, didn't cause problems. We were sitting there listening to music, says Andrei, who was released home after interrogations. He sits in the kitchen, fidgeting with a glass of water in his hands. He speaks softly, slowly. They were polite, called us Aunt Vera, Aunt Natasha. May we, they say, sit with you. Sit down, just don't swear or burden us with anything. They observed subordination, addressed us formally, V. Andrei falls silent, looks out the window. Then he continues. Then Saveli and Maxim came over. We sat together. Nobody argued, nothing like that happened. Everything was normal. Someone was telling jokes. Tests and witness testimonies preliminarily showed Andrei's non-involvement in this brutal crime. His alibi was checked. It matched. The boy was painting a fence with his father when journalists approached their house. The father allowed his son to explain the events of that ill-fated evening. He stood nearby, listening, smoking. Sometimes he nodded, implying, "It's true, that's how it was." According to the boy, he and Maxim didn't interact often. They saw each other at school, sometimes on the street. Acquaintances, but not friends. They studied at the same school, but in different classes. According to the teenager, Maxim had problems at school. He didn't get along with teachers. He was insolent, rude. That same year, he was transferred to homeschooling, and he completely abandoned his studies. He stopped attending altogether. During the day, he was seen on the street when others were in lessons. On that late evening, Andrei was the first to join the women at their table. He started chatting with Aunt Vera, asked about her daughter, how her studies were, how things were going. Outside, at this time, stood Maxim with his friend Saveli from Krasnodar. According to Andrei, he had seen the latter for the third time in his life. The first time, when he came to Maxim's. The second, a week ago in the yard. The third, here, at the cafe. Seeing that Andrei was sitting in the company of women, the other two also joined the table. Maxim sat next to Natalia, Saveli opposite. They sat calmly, no one argued. Saveli once addressed Aunt Natasha with T, the informal you, and she corrected him. "How am I a T to you? For you, I am Aunt Natasha." Her voice was strict, but not angry. She just put him in his place. Saveli nodded, didn't use T again. Closer to midnight, everyone dispersed, Andrei recalls. He looks at the table, fingers drumming on the tabletop. He claims, until the last moment there were no conflicts. No one bothered the women. He added only one detail. Saveli seemed to have danced with Natalia. Music was playing. He stood up, invited her. She smiled, stood up. They danced a little, then sat back down. And otherwise, nothing happened. At midnight, the cafe's saleswoman closed the establishment. She turned off the lights, put a lock on the door. Everyone began to disperse. Vera asked Andrei to walk her home. He agreed immediately. Leaving the establishment, the women went in different directions. They hugged goodbye. "Good night," said Natalia. "And to you," replied Vera. These were the last words her friend heard from her. Vera herself doesn't walk unaccompanied. Her son always meets her from work. It's safe in Tsibai during the day, but at night the darkness is frightening. But Natasha, according to her friend, was spirited. She feared nothing, could fight back if necessary. She had a strong character. She didn't let her husband get away with anything. If something was wrong, she spoke up immediately. She could scold and put someone in their place. CCTV cameras at the cafe recorded. Vera and 16-year-old Andrei went left, towards the center. And Natalia went right, down a dark alley. Her silhouette is visible in the footage for a few more seconds, then dissolves into the darkness. Detention. 20-year-old Savelli, Maxim's friend, was detained first, near the crime scene, literally 200 meters away. He sat on the curb, swaying from side to side. His clothes were bloody, his hands too. The Cossacks saw him, surrounded him. "Stop." Savelli didn't even try to run away. He looked at them with a hazy gaze, slowly raised his hands. The detainee explained, saying he wasn't local, got drunk, got lost, and started wandering. His voice was calm, words clear. He didn't really look drunk. He spoke coherently, stood steadily. But he was covered in blood. That was a fact. Natalia's husband was also immediately brought in for interrogation. A standard procedure. Close relatives are checked first. The interrogators, as usual, first checked the husband's involvement in the brutal murder. And, as usual, very cynically, they explained nothing. Simply said, "You brutally killed her, disfigured her, pulled her guts out." Alexei sat in the office, looking at the investigator. He didn't understand. "Me? I killed her?" His voice was broken. The investigator nodded. "Who else?" This is how Alexei described the interrogation. He sat there for several hours. He answered questions, underwent tests. Then he was released. His alibi was ironclad. There were witnesses. And in the morning, 16-year-old Maxim was detained. They found him at home, sleeping. They woke him up, told him to get dressed. His mother screamed, cried. His father was silent, looking at the floor. Maxim immediately confessed to everything. He didn't even try to deny it. He sat in the investigator's office and started recounting, in detail, calmly, without emotion. The investigator was writing, then stopped him. "Wait, do you understand what you're saying?" Maxim nodded. "I understand." And he continued. His friend Savili was then released, and he quickly left for Krasnodar, that same day, on the very first electric train. He didn't even pack his belongings, he just left like that. Maxim's family didn't leave the house due to harassment from fellow villagers. They covered the windows, disconnected the phone. Neighbors shouted outside their windows. Someone threw a stone. A window pane broke. Maxim's younger brother was beaten on his way from school. 3 guys caught up, knocked him down, kicked him. "This is for Natasha," they said, and left. The boy came home covered in bruises, his shirt torn. His mother saw him and fainted. "We didn't try to buy anyone off. That's all a lie. I believe that any evil must be punished, justice must prevail," Maxim's mother said through the intercom, through tears. Her voice trembled, her words interrupted by sobs. "We've been hounded. The younger one was beaten at school. We don't go out. We're being threatened. But I believe my son couldn't have done such a thing. We have double grief, and we sympathize with that family." She fell silent, then added more quietly, "No, I don't believe it. I just know my child. He is not capable of that. He is distressed and afraid." Maxim's grandmother also doesn't believe in her grandson's guilt. She sits in the kitchen, drinking tea, her hands trembling. She believes his older friend Saveli framed him so he wouldn't get a life sentence himself. This Saveli is already an adult, cunning. Maxim is still a child, foolish. He could easily pin everything on him. Local Cossacks were also surprised when they learned the name of the main suspect. Although Maxim wasn't an excellent student, he always behaved adequately, according to locals. Even when intoxicated, he understood everything. If they were reprimanded, they apologized and dispersed, meaning they behaved normally. No one could commit such a thing, even when drunk. Could the teenagers have accosted the woman in the dark alley and turned savage after a harsh rebuff? This was for the investigation to determine. It is known that not only a huge dose of alcohol, 2.3 per ml in one, 2.7 in the other, but also banned substances were found in the blood of both. Spice, synthetics. Expert examination showed they had consumed them recently. The effect was still active at the time of the crime. Investigation. The local investigative committee initially opened a criminal case for intentional homicide, Article 105, without aggravating circumstances, an ordinary murder, if one can say so. Natalia's family had many complaints about the investigation. Relatives came demanding explanations. They were fobbed off. An investigation is underway, we cannot comment. Firstly, there was no body identification. Relatives were simply informed. It's her, no formalities. Secondly, the victim's family approached the investigation with the question, why was the second teenager released without taking his samples? Saveli left for Krasnodar clean. No expert examinations, nothing. How could that be? There were no grounds, the investigation replied. Why wasn't the case qualified under a more serious article, murder with extreme cruelty? Article 105, Part 2, Point D. That's a life sentence for an adult. But no, just 105. Furthermore, the investigation remained silent about the desecration. In the first reports, they wrote, murder. That's all. About rape, about extracted organs, not a word. According to the mother of the deceased husband, one of the culprits, Maxim, they immediately wanted to declare insane and quickly place in a psychiatric hospital. Not to a pre-trial detention center, not to court, but straight to a mental hospital for compulsory treatment. And that's it, case closed. The family was allegedly called anonymously and warned, while you are mourning Natalia and arranging the funeral, law enforcement agencies want to hush up the case. Who made the call was unknown. The voice was male, unfamiliar. He spoke and hung up, but that was enough for the family to raise the alarm. Ominous rumors quickly spread through the village. A gang was operating in Psibe, a teenage group that attacked people at night. People believed that this particular group had killed a man a year ago, whose body was found in a ravine. The crime remains unsolved to this day. The body had lain there for several days until dogs smelled it. Hunters found it. Other cases of attacks on people were recalled. Someone recounted being attacked 6 months ago. He was walking in the evening. They came from behind, hit him. He woke up without his wallet and phone. Someone else said his daughter was being followed. She was walking home from school and noticed someone following her. She ran and managed to hide. It was already unclear what of this was true and what was invention. Fear generates stories. Rally. Just a day after the teenager's arrest, a huge crowd, residents not only of Psibe, but also of neighboring settlements, came out for a rally. The square in front of the former cinema. Several hundred people. Posters, banners. People shouted, demanding justice. People called officials to account. "Come out," the crowd chanted. "Explain." The officials emerged, pale, in suits. They stood on the porch as if on a scaffold. Residents believed wealthy parents would get their children off the hook for Natalia's brutal murder. In a small settlement, everyone knows who's who. They said Maxim's father was the district's chief forester, known for allegedly solving problems through force and bribery. "He has connections," someone from the crowd shouted. "He'll buy everyone off." District and settlement leaders, investigators and prosecutors stood on the porch of the former cinema and blushed for a long time, answering for the sins of past years. For 3 hours, people complained about biased investigations, rude treatment by law enforcement, and the lack of a proper police station. One woman stepped forward, speaking into a megaphone. "A month ago, I reported a theft. Do you know what they told me? It's your own fault. You should have kept it safer. That's how our police work." The crowd rumbled. Another person shouted, "And when my son got drunk, they didn't take him home, but to the station. There they beat him and let him go. Is this protection?" And the people achieved resonance. The chairs beneath the law enforcement and officials began to shake. A week later, the head of the Psibe urban settlement left his post. He submitted his resignation of his own free will. Everyone understood that the desire wasn't entirely his own. "No, we don't have that in our territory. This fact is not confirmed here," one of the officials justified himself. Sweat ran down his face. A handkerchief crumpled in his hand. His voice trembled. The crowd whistled, shouted. His words were drowned out by the noise. Sometimes it is indeed very important to report on such cases, and it's important that society does not ignore them. To be fair, it should be noted, not all rumors had a basis. The father of the detained Maxim was not a magnate at all. He worked as a manager at a woodworking complex. Average salary, ordinary apartment. The family lived neither poorly nor richly. An old car, simple furniture, no special connections. The gang that allegedly operated in the village was also a rumor. Not a single confirmed case of an attack by this gang could be found. Apparently, local law enforcement wanted to solve Natalia's murder case quietly, without unnecessary fuss or attention from the regional department or Moscow. This way, they could keep their positions and avoid a purge. Open a case under a minor article, quickly close it, report. Everything under control, everything in order. And so, perhaps, it would have been. And the charge would have been different, and there wouldn't have been 2 detainees. Investigators would not now be speaking so compliantly with the victim's family, nor would they be providing comments on the progress of the investigation at the first request. Unfortunately, this is not always the case. In this story, thanks to the people, the mechanism was finally set in motion. The criminal case was taken under special control by the central apparatus of the Investigative Committee of Russia, SKR, and its head, Alexander Bastrykin. An investigative team arrived from Moscow, experienced detectives for whom such cases were not new. Immediately after this, the second suspect, Savelli, was detained in Krasnodar. An arrest team kicked in the door and entered. Savelli was lying on the sofa, looking at his phone. He didn't even seem surprised. "I knew you would come," he said calmly. This time, like Maxim, he was placed in a pre-trial detention center. Solitary cell. 23 hours a day within 4 walls. And later information emerged. The teenager might have had a previous conviction, a suspended sentence for a fight, from which he was already free. But the fact itself is telling. In the media, there was talk of the dismissal of the school director where one of the suspects studied. The director had held the position for 15 years. Now she was asked to leave. Officially, to retire. In reality, everyone understood the reason. The brutal crime attracted the attention of federal media, including scandalous talk shows on leading channels. Celebrities from the TV screen discussed the details and also demanded just punishment for the criminals. Cameras, lights, studio audience. "How could this have happened?" the host asked from the screen. "Where were the police?" Guests nodded, outraged. The whole country learned about the brutal murder in Psybai. The case was reclassified under a more serious article, Article 105, Part 2, Murder with Extreme Cruelty. Now, life imprisonment was a possibility. Experienced detectives from the main investigative department of the Investigative Committee of Russia, SKR, in Moscow took over its investigation. Seasoned investigators who had worked on the most high-profile cases. Recordings from the cameras in that very cafe were obtained. However, the footage was very blurry. The cameras were old, the quality poor. It can be seen how the women stand by their table. Around them were teenagers. Natalia lightly hits one of them in the face, not hard, rather pushing him away, and leaves. Who exactly? It's impossible to make out. Faces are blurry, silhouettes indistinct. Next, it is seen that 2 young men follow her. First one, a few seconds later, the second. They walk unhurriedly, hands in their pockets. The teenagers were charged. The elder, Savelli, faced up to life imprisonment. Article 105, Part 2. This is serious. Maxim, due to his age, faced up to 10 years. Minors are not given life imprisonment. The main question remained. For what reason could the mother of 5 children have been so cruelly murdered? Verdict. The verdict in the case of the murder of the mother of many children in Psybai was delivered in October 2019. 9 months after the start of the criminal case proceedings. The court examined 35 volumes of materials and interrogated 60 witnesses. Each volume hundreds of pages. Testimonies, expert examinations, photographs. The judge read everything in sequence, slowly, carefully. The prosecutor stated, "When Natalia was returning home, young men approached her and offered to walk her home. She agreed. They were acquaintances, locals. They walked with her, but along the way, they picked up stones. They lay on the roadside, cobblestones. They picked them up, hid them behind their backs. And they inflicted 19 blows to her head. 19. The expert later showed on a dummy, here a blow, here, and here. Her entire skull was fractured. Natalia, bleeding, begged them to leave her alone, but they continued to beat her in the face, turning it into a pulp. Her face ceased to be a face. One eye was dislodged from its orbit. Her nose was broken in 3 places. While Natalia tried to breathe through her broken nose, blood gurgled in her throat, gasps. They proceeded to outrage her. One of them took out a knife, a folding tourist knife. He opened it, looked at the blade, and committed such an act that it is impossible to describe. As a result, internal organs were mixed, some even pulled out. Stomach, intestines. They lay next to her on the grass. Experts later collected everything, putting it back for autopsy. Natalia Dmitrieva's relatives buried her with an open coffin despite the prohibition. At the morgue, they asked to close it. It looked too terrible. But the family insisted. They wanted to show what the monsters had done to her. Let everyone see. Almost all residents of the settlement came to the funeral. The queue stretched for hundreds of meters. People stood silently, crying. No one spoke. They just stood. Each of the criminals tried to minimize his role in the brutal reprisal. "It was him," Maxim pointed at Savely. "No, it was him," Savely replied. Both stated that they had walked the woman home, but allegedly did not commit all the actions imputed to them. "I was just walking nearby," Maxim said. He sat in the cage, looking down. "I didn't hit her. I just stood there." "And the knife?" the prosecutor asked. A pause. "He had the knife." Savely shook his head. "A lie. He had the knife. I was stopping him." In the end, neither of them admitted guilt. Therefore, during the trial, all information obtained during the preliminary investigation stage was thoroughly examined. This was not an easy case, including from a moral standpoint. Lawyers later said, "Something like this is unforgettable. It appears in nightmares." Both defendants behaved calmly, yet stubbornly stuck to their story. They sat in cages, looking straight ahead. Their faces were expressionless, their gazes empty. The teenagers did not name the reason why they had acted so cruelly towards 40-year-old Natalia. When asked, they remained silent. "Why did you do it?" "I don't know." "What did you feel?" "Nothing." They showed absolutely no remorse. There was no hint on their faces that they understood themselves to be criminals. Maxim yawned once during the hearing. Savelyi drew something on paper, abstract patterns, lines. They claimed that sexual intercourse occurred with the victim's own consent. She wanted it herself, Savelyi said. She undressed herself. The prosecutor silently showed photographs of torn clothing. Savelyi turned away. But their attempts to clear themselves failed. Based on the evidence in the case, it is clear their criminal actions were coordinated. Traces of both were at the scene, fingerprints on the stones. One helped the other commit the murder, and all these horrors with the poor woman. DNA of both was found on the victim's body, and under the victim's fingernails, their skin. She resisted, scratched, tried to fight back. Maxim's mother said she would defend her son to the very end. She sat through all the hearings, crying, "This isn't my boy, he was framed." But the father immediately cut ties, let him serve his full sentence. He came to one hearing, looked at his son. The son lowered his eyes. The father turned around and left. He never appeared again. It was clear that there would be no life for the family in the village, so they immediately moved to Noryelsk. They sold their apartment for a pittance, packed their belongings. They left at night so no one would see them. During the investigation, it was revealed the murder could possibly have been prevented if an OMVD employee had properly fulfilled her duties. A month before the crime, Maxim, along with other teenagers, participated in the theft of property from a local resident. They broke into a shed and took out tools and equipment. The victim contacted the police and filed a report. But the OMVD employee insisted that he drop the charges against the young robbers. "Come on, they're just kids. Return the items and you'll part ways." The man didn't want to, but he was persuaded. More precisely, forced. On May 7, 2018, 5 days before the murder, she issued a refusal to initiate a criminal case. She signed the paper and affixed her seal. If the case had been opened, Maxim would have been under investigation. He wouldn't have been walking the streets. He wouldn't have gone to that cafe. The investigator who refused to open the case was stripped of the right to hold positions in law enforcement agencies for 3 years. Disqualification. Also, after a review of public order enforcement, many police officers were fired or voluntarily resigned. A figure of up to 30 people was mentioned. A serious purge of the ranks had taken place. District police officers and other employees whose work is aimed at preventing such crimes also paid the price. The head of the local police department submitted his resignation. His deputy also. Investigators, inquiry officers, about 10 people left immediately. Some were forcibly dismissed, while others wrote their own resignation letters, seeing how things stood. Minor Maxim Bondarenko was sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment. This is the maximum sentence for a minor under this article. Until he was 18, he served his sentence in a juvenile correctional facility. Conditions there are milder than in an adult penal colony. Study, work, routine. He was then transferred to a general regime penal colony. It is stricter there. Adult rules, adult order. The court sentenced his accomplice, Savyely Nikiforov, to 19 years in a strict regime penal colony. 19 years is almost a life sentence. He will come out an old man, if he comes out at all, at 39 years old. His entire youth behind bars. Alexei Dmitriev, who lost his wife, considers the sentence too lenient. He stood outside the courthouse after the verdict was announced, smoking. Journalists approached him and asked what he fought. He took a drag, exhaled smoke. Too little. He should have gotten life. He was speaking about Savili. He insisted on a life sentence for the adult perpetrator. Currently, Alexei is raising his children independently, receiving support from his new wife. He got married a year after the tragedy, not out of happiness, but out of necessity. The children needed a mother. The woman is good. She treats the children kindly. But she is not Natalia. The children understand this. He strives to give the children a good upbringing and education, what Natalia had dreamed of. The eldest son helps his father. He works, bringing money into the house. The younger son attends school along with his only daughter. The girl is growing up, becoming more and more like her mother. The same eyes, the same smile. Natalia was only 40 years old, an age when life truly begins. Children are growing up. There's more time for oneself. One can travel, dream, plan. She was raising 5 children. The eldest was 20 at the time. Her second boy was a classmate of the killer. They sat at the same desk in elementary school. The third son was in 2nd grade. The fourth went to kindergarten. The youngest girl was 2 years old at the time of the tragedy. While the older children tried to cope with the horror, visiting a psychologist, talking, the 2-year-old girl walked through the rooms calling for her mother. She would go into the bedroom, look at the empty bed. "Mama?" Silence. Alexei would pick her up, hold her close. He remained silent. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. Natalia was an exemplary mother and wife. It's strange that people started to appear who blamed her for simply going to a cafe that evening to sit with a friend. What was she doing there? Some asked. Why did she go? It's her own fault. Everyone meets with friends. Is there anything wrong with that? The woman had a right to rest, for a few hours of freedom from household chores. No one is to blame that monsters crossed her path. I saw him. We asked the guy, "Why are you so drunk?" And he said he was going to leave for the north, so he was celebrating. We left with him, and the next day we found out that he, well, killed a woman, recalls one of the witnesses. She sits in the kitchen, her hands cupping a mug. She speaks softly, with pauses. "In what state did you see him?" She thinks, looks out the window. "Well, he was laughing." "You're just standing, talking to him, and he might suddenly just start laughing out of nowhere. He was acting erratically. On something, do you think?" "Under the influence of alcohol, too, but not only." She falls silent. Outside the window, it gets dark. In Pisabai, the streetlights go out again. 33 bulbs on the main street. The rest, darkness.